Project Reality is dying, a sentiment I've heard repeatedly over the last few months, and while I was reluctant to agree initially, upon ample research and introspection, I can't help but agree. The first place you'd look is to the player count. In 2020, for example, Grump reports 648 players online, a lofty number I certainly haven't seen in 2022. In November 2012, the server list looked like this. That's less than 648 players, but still very impressive. Comparing those numbers of the past to the max 300 players you'd expect today, it's hard to argue anything other than that the game is on the way to complete obsolescence. However, the issue is a little more complicated than player numbers alone. Any player worth their salt will attest that the quantity of players is not always that important. Even with just 100 active players, one good server is all you need to enjoy the game. The real issues Project Reality is facing, and the reason I think many are leaving or feel the game is dying when they do play it, lies in a combination of the following: new players and the way they play the game, an increase in content creators and the style of video they make, the death of Battlefield, a dilution of the realism shooter market with the introduction of other realism shooters, and the often poor quality server options available in PR. I'll be covering all these topics, so get comfy, strap in, and here we go. New players and the way they play the game. While Project Reality doesn't often hit the high active player numbers of old, I have definitely noticed a large number of new players in the game. It's no secret that Project Reality, like any milsim or realism shooter, comes with a steep learning curve. These games are difficult to learn because you're not just trying to get to grips with the new mechanics and squad roles, but also fundamental communication tactics, unique server rules, and how to play the game, air quotes, correctly. I've spoken about this before, but in many ways realism shooters and PR especially are a lot like Airsoft, built on the back of the idea that everyone there is there to have a certain experience. Most dedicated milsimmers are not logging on to run around solo across the battlefield. They're there because they're after actual squad play and communication. I've found that many new players in Project Reality not only disregard this aspect of the game, but actively work against it, and have no real interest in that element of the game at all. They would much prefer to take a cool kit, run around solo, and mindlessly attack flags for kills. The real problem is that this hasn't just infected new players, but also many veteran players. I've found that most older PR players have no interest in running a squad, coordinating a bunch of randoms, or playing closely with their squad mates at all. The solo, run and gun strategy never used to work in older versions of PR, not because the engine didn't allow it, but because the larger majority of the server was coordinated, meaning solos had very limited success. Nowadays, mindlessly running around as part of the blue blob is a very effective strategy shared by new players and veterans alike. Content creators. The new player issue is unfortunately compounded or perhaps even introduced by an influx in content creators. When I first started making Project Reality videos many years ago, the amount of dedicated PR content creators was very small, and the viewership of a Project Reality video very predictable. You'd be unlikely to see more than 1,000 views unless you were Flupple, and the majority of the viewership came from other Project Reality players and sharing within the community. Speaking of content creators, maybe it's time you dropped a like and subscribed. Just saying. Of course, the YouTube algorithm of the past is not the algorithm of today. Watching this video, you've no doubt watched at least one random moments video, often referred to under other names such as highlights or PTSD simulator, either from myself or any of the other far superior content creators coming up at speed. All these videos share one thing in common. They present a version of Project Reality that isn't really in the spirit of the game. I'm certainly culpable of this, and I'm absolutely shooting myself in the foot right now, but the reality is that gathering highlight-worthy clips is a task often carried out by solo players in free kit squads. It's very difficult in PR to go on killing sprees or get cool clips in general if you're locked into playing with a squad. Defending a flag or covering a doorway all round is often a great way to win the game, but very boring to watch. Content creators will usually actively avoid playing in a coordinated squad so as to avoid being locked into the more boring, less watchable parts of the game. Now the counter-argument is that, as a content creator, why not make content promoting squad play and teamwork, highlighting squad leader rounds and strong communication? Unfortunately, the reality is that regardless of the quality of the video you make, the algorithm will rarely push this style of video while heavily promoting flashy highlights. Presumably, highlights are more watchable for a wider audience. And here, of course, is the issue. Creators are attracting new players by promoting the game in a way that the game shouldn't really be played. New players are then opting to play the game as a solo run and gun style, following the tactics they've been exposed to. Other players then follow suit, and before you know it, PR is no better than Battlefield. The state of Battlefield doesn't help. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past few years, you'll no doubt know that the Battlefield franchise, as of late, has been spending much of its time beating itself over the head with a hammer. This has had rather a noticeable knock-on effect for the shooter industry as a whole. Where once more casual players had Battlefield games they could go to, where they could have a kind of team-based experience on a large battlefield, this is no longer an option. Instead, these same players have been displaced into realism shooters, many of which have begun to downgrade their hardcore milsim values in favour of a more casual-friendly experience. In the most recent squad update, for example, players can now see their squad members, their kits, and whether they're alive or not on the HUD, without having to open their map or communicate with anyone at all. In Battlefield 3 Reality mod, they've added indicators on the HUD that highlights the direction of downed players in need of revive without the need to open the map or communicate with anyone, following calls for such a mechanic from the community. These players don't want to play a realism shooter, they want to play Battlefield. While I don't necessarily think Project Reality has done this, other popular realism shooters have, which has no doubt changed how players play these games, and by extension, changed how any new players to PR also play the game or expect the game to be played. A dilution of the realism shooter market. Back when I first started playing PR, it was one of the only games on the market that had an in-game directional VoIP, where you could talk to players locally around you. At the time, this was a huge selling point, and a big draw for the game. Nowadays, it's hard to find a milsim that doesn't have this feature. Squad and Hell Let Loose are two of the more popular realism shooters out there at the moment. Squad in particular has been really hitting its stride in the past few years, helped greatly by the letdown of Battlefield 2042. These games, with actual financial backing, have likely drawn what were once PR players across to their new games. Squad in particular was once hailed as Project Reality 2, a spiritual sequel set to keep the core of the game while updating the graphics and general PR jank. However, you'll notice when playing most realism shooters outside of PR that while the player base is higher and server choice is more plentiful, general game quality is much worse. Spawn in, instantly spawn kill. In Squad, you'll find plenty of players without a mic who have absolutely no intention of playing with a squad and are there purely to run around solo, shooting people.
Alright, mic check time, please. Person.
Yeah.
Hello, is this working?
Yes. DCG. No. DCG.
Oh. No doubt, the popularity of this style of gameplay in these games has leaked into the minds of players joining Project Reality, attributing to the downfall of game quality in Project Reality also. Server options. The servers available to play on in Project Reality are not great. I made a poll recently asking Project Reality viewers who watch PR content but don't play the game what stops them from playing. The lead reason was a lack of time, but in close second was the issue of servers. I've heard this time and time again. While initially I was reluctant to accept this argument, having now played a solid amount of PR in 2022, I think I agree. Looking back at these server screenshots from 2012, you can see what's been lost. New, Merc, NWA, QRF, HOG, CIA. 6 solid servers, 2 American, 4 European. These weren't just options, these were good options. Each of these servers had established admins, who were held accountable by the clans they were a part of, each trying to create communities they wanted to play with on their servers. Nowadays, your options are HOG and maybe U777, a US and a European server. On HOG, you're most likely to find the best PR players, but the hit reg is god-awful, and the admin decisions questionable. As admins on the server are largely an amalgamation of various clan members and admins from some of these older servers, admins are largely not held accountable and will often take action for the benefit of their friends over acting for the benefit of the server. U777 and some of the newer European servers trying to find their way do offer a better hit reg experience, but for some reason the voice communication on these servers is laggy and only works intermittently. This, combined with the fact that you tend to get worse players on these servers, as they're often largely populated by players on the HOG ban list, means any chance of having an actual good team-based game is almost obsolete. The admins on these servers are also just as biased and unaccountable as on HOG. There's of course the Russian server, but if you don't speak Russian, you're going to have a tough time. Meanwhile, the Brazilian server offers up a near 300 ping to a European, which is far from ideal. Some people on my Discord have suggested I run my own server, and while the offer is tempting, in the current economic climate where my rent is going up by £800 next month and my energy bill has already doubled, paying for the upkeep of a server and obligatory server website is not very feasible. Conclusion: PR is dying, and there's no quick fix. The soul of the game feels lost, with squad play often a rarity instead of the norm. Casual Battlefield players have become casual milsim players, and milsims have grown and shifted their own design to accommodate this. But at the end of the day, I feel it's the lack of choice or sense of community that's killing this game. PR was built on the back of communities of players all working together to try and have the best game experience they could. Unfortunately, you'll often find when talking to anyone on a server in 2022 that they have a distaste, both for the admins and the very server they play on, but have no choice, so can't go anywhere else. But what do you think? Is PR dead or fully dead? Are there any medics nearby? Is PR even using a mic, or is it going to bleed out quietly without letting anyone know it needs a res? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like what you see, drop a like and subscribe. Maybe we can entice some rich benefactors to buy some more servers. Other than that, all the best and have a great day.